So recently, Extraction 2 was released on Netflix and it seemed to be getting some good word of mouth. As a big fan of 80s and 90s action flicks, I'm kind of a skeptical guy when it comes to action movies these days. For sure, things are not as bad as they were around 15-20 years back. We've got some good action films coming out these days, the John Wick movies for example, but a lot of the time, if we're even lucky enough to get big budget R-rated action films, they often fail to deliver, more often than not being hampered by tired issues, whether it be poor CGI, tokenism and pandering, or action scenes that just aren't very engaging. So I was mildly hopeful for the Extraction films. I heard the first was okay and the second was good, but having seen both, in fact, having seen them back to back, one after the other in the same sitting, I had a blast with both films. I found them really enjoyable, a throwback to 80s action films utilizing modern technology and thus allowing us to see things done in such a way that were not possible back in the day. I say throwback, and that word is often overused these days to mean constant references to older films and nostalgia bait. But what I mean here is that the Extraction movies are sincere, played straight, simple, and aim to please you with adrenaline-pumping, exciting action. I wouldn't mind at all seeing more of these. I know a third is in the works, and I think it'd be great if we see several of these pictures where the globe-trotting main character completes different tasks all throughout the world in different locations. I actually enjoyed the first one slightly more than the second, in spite of the sequel getting the better reviews. Maybe the colours of the subcontinent resonated more than the rather dull grey and blue colour palettes of Extraction 2, or maybe it's because the first one surprised me and raised my expectations of the sequel. But I did feel the world was more dangerous in the first one. Certainly when you see children being thrown off rooftops or shot in the head, you get the feeling that anything could happen. But there was just something about the second one that felt safer. I felt tense in Extraction, but I felt comfortable in Extraction 2, that everything would be okay in the end. Perhaps it was because there was a single target in the first movie, a young boy, whereas in the second, the jeopardy is spread to an entire family. Extraction was also a lot more believable than its sequel. I mean, I'm not going to nitpick, these are action films, but Chris Hemsworth is holding onto a ledge with one hand, holding another person in the other arm, stopping them from falling to their doom. And he gets shot in the hand he's using to keep himself alive and still stays on the ledge. And not only does he and the person he's holding on to come out of this situation alive and well, Hemsworth goes on to beat the crap out of the guy who shot him using the same hand. When things like that happen, you become a bit less engaged, knowing that things will work out as our hero's plot armor is nice and thick. Of course, the main reason you're here is for the action scenes, and they deliver. I especially liked how usually the geography of the situation was clear, where characters were, where they needed to go, where the enemy was. The coordinated fighting was nice to watch too, characters working together and communicating to overcome their odds. The action isn't dumb, like a part where Hemsworth shows up and starts blowing stuff up at one point. It seems like it's just there for explosions, but in this case he makes a point to destroy all methods of transport for his targets to escape in. It's so aggressively ferocious, like one part where Hemsworth's arm is on fire and he basically puts it out by repeatedly punching a guy. Who on earth is Sam Hargreaves and where did he get the balls to make two movies like these? Between him and the guys who made the John Wick movies, we definitely need more stunt workers in the director's chair. So Chris Hemsworth is our brooding, stoic hero, a fearless black market mercenary who, in the first film, is hired along with his team to rescue the kidnapped son of an imprisoned gangster who's been abducted by the gangster's rival in the Indian subcontinent. Though the story is of course not at the forefront of the film's strength. The world building is solid, the characters are interesting enough, and Hemsworth is believable and engaging as our protagonist, and funny too in small doses when he needs to be, and there's plenty of scenes where he needs to get emotional and act. Both films have a similar structure. The opening sets up the story, and with the second film, it's a prison extraction where the plot is a bit more personal to Hemsworth's character and thus tells us a bit more about his past. Then the extraction takes place. accompanied by some excellent, enthralling action scenes. Then the film slows down about halfway through on the hour mark. There's a bit of talking, a bit of character development, and usually something goes wrong. Like in the first film, for example, the gangster all of a sudden refuses to pay for the son when he is rescued from the rival. So Hemsworth, who is here for the money, has the tough choice of abandoning the kid and removing himself from the equation, or fighting his way out of a lockdown city with the boy to save his life. And then we get the film's big action set piece in the second half of the film. Funnily enough, I thought the first half of both films were better than the second halves. They could have easily worked as short 1-hour films. But it's mainly because of the action. If we simplify things, there's 2 main action scenes in each film, and the first one in both films is better than the second. For example, in Extraction 1, we get a really cool series of events as Hemsworth fights his way out of the bad guy's den. There's guns, fists, martial arts, and then a fantastic car chase. But the climax action scene, while good on its own, fails to match the earlier one, being a simple shootout on a bridge where Hemsworth basically crouches around going pew 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 as he makes his way across the bridge. It's the same with the second film, which has an insane series of action scenes in the first half, starting with a prison riot with some long takes. A riot which I took to be a nod to The Raid 2, perhaps the best action film of this century. Anyway, the gang is on the run, they hop onto a train, and like something out of a PlayStation game, Hemsworth takes down about 2 or 3 helicopters with this big, massive Tyrannosaurus of a weapon. Mad stuff, the kind that awakens that inner child in you. I guess you could say the second film has 3 main action scenes: the extraction, the one where things go wrong, and an additional revenge mission. But the last of these, while again fine, isn't as good as the second set piece, and definitely not as good as the first action scene. But all in all, the duo of films are an excellent addition to the action genre and get a thumbs up from me.